Counsel podcast. My name is Greg Phillips, and today my guest is Kevin Fairfield. Kevin is an orthopedic manipulative physiotherapist as well as an osteopathic practitioner. He has over 25 years industry experience and runs his practice out of the sports clinic in Oakville as well as the Carlisle Physiotherapy and Rehabilitation Center. On a personal note, I'd like to thank and acknowledge that Kevin helped me with 2 serious injuries, which has allowed me to continue to do triathlons and the sports that I love. So thank you, Kevin, and welcome.
Thank you.
How are things today?
Great. I'm just up at the cottage. I'm coming off of 10 days straight of working. I was on a course for 4 days, so it's my first day off in a while. So it's nice.
So you're relaxing. Good.
Relaxing.
Got to relax every once in a while and take some time off and re-energize.
Absolutely.
So I thought we'd start by having you kind of explain what prompted you to become an osteopath and a physiotherapist. Like, what was the origins, I guess?
Mm-hmm. I actually wanted to be a lawyer first and foremost. I went to school. Yeah, I went to school at McMaster University for 4 years with the intention of entering into law, but not really having. I think I wanted to be called a lawyer more so than wanting to be a lawyer, having a passion for the law. So I was always interested in the body. So I was always reading physiology and anatomy books really on the side. And McMaster University was the only university in Canada that accepts medical students and physiotherapy students without a background. Okay. So without a background in science, that is. So right. They allow a few people every year, and they've been doing this since the 70s. And they realized that when they take some people from the outside the science realm, they tend to be the best practitioners because they can think inside and outside the box. So I applied to physio school and I got in, and then the rest is history. It was just kind of full steam ahead, and I loved it, and I still love it. So it was another 3 years at McMaster to become a physiotherapist, another 4 years to become a manipulative physiotherapist. And then I was about 29 or 30 years old. And to become a manipulative physiotherapist, that's about 1% of the physios in the world. And so everybody else felt really proud of themselves. And I was like, that's it. There has to be more. Right. So it led me to 10 years of learning osteopathy, another 10 years of dissection. So I'm almost 50 years old. So I'm still jumping into so many different realms of medicine just to bring everything together.
Very good. And as we've discussed, you have a passion for just learning in general. So, it's great to hear you describe how you got to this point in your career. You mentioned something to me in the past about that I found interesting, the person that you studied under out of Montreal for your osteopathy, certification.
Right.
Can you touch on that briefly about that individual and how that came to be, kind of thing?
Mm-hmm. I remember finishing my practical exams to become a manipulative physiotherapist, and we're actually, a bunch of us got together to celebrate. And I was a little bit down because I was like, they're thinking they're on top of the world, and I was like, again, in search for there's got to be more than this. I'm 29 years old. There's no way I've reached the peak of the mountain. Right. And so one of my therapist mentors just came off a dissection program with Guy Voyer, who is the osteopath from France who teaches in Montreal. And she said, you got to meet this guy, Kevin. He's going to basically, he'll inspire you. And I went to one of his classes, and that was it. I was hooked. And it was just a different view of how to look at people's symptoms. You looked at the whole body. You looked at all the different systems of the body. Like physiotherapy, you study all the systems, but you compartmentalize everything. You don't really know how to mesh everything together. And under his teachings, because is a medical doctor, and my training were done by medical doctors who are osteopaths, right. With a big component on anatomy and dissection. That really interested me. So I really look for the people who have a good medical background because I want to learn from them. So that was the beginning of the next 10 years of my life.
Wow. So kind of learn from the best motto.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. It's like when when we train, we're always like train with people that are better with you, whether it's, I guess, in your career or in sports. And that's what's going to drive you to be obviously better versus
Absolutely.
the status quo.
Always looking for somebody who puts me on my toes, for sure.
Right. You touched on it there a little bit about, and what I want to explore with you is kind of some of the differences between an osteopath and a physiotherapist. So you're talking about structure and thinking outside of the box kind of thing. So maybe you can just elaborate a little bit more on that if you don't mind.
Sure. So you learn all the different systems of the body in both disciplines. But in physio, I'd be classified as an orthopedic physiotherapist, somebody who deals with like bones and muscles and locomotion, and they call that musculoskeletal kind of, I guess that would be MSK would be the acronym for that type of discipline. And then you have physiotherapists who work in the hospital in cardiac rehab, other ones who work with like a neurology background, but they're not putting all those systems together. A good osteopath, not all osteopaths, a good osteopath puts all those things together. So I own a sports medicine clinic, so I know how to treat sports injuries, but I also see so many other things that I guess maybe other people aren't putting the puzzles together. And so you get to understand that you are one body and everything's interrelated, and you need to be able to take a step back, assess that person's body. You understand their symptoms, but look for the causation or the patterns of strain that could be causing digestive problems that could be linked to back problems. And I just don't think many people know how to do that well. And I'm learning how to do that well.
Good. And like when I visited you, sometimes I'll come in with a symptom, let's say, for example, pain in my knee or whatever, and you don't always immediately, you're concerned about the knee, but you're not thinking necessarily that the issue is the knee. It could be something else that's causing that pain, so to speak.
Yeah, like I try to allocate a half an hour to an hour when I'm treating somebody, because it's called differential diagnosis. Well, what is this? Is it as simple as the knee pain? The knee is the problem, it's the culprit. And I think one of the latest statistics, I have to get the research article on this, but they said healthcare professionals, about 80% of them have you pegged within 5 minutes of meeting you. So, and I'm like, we can't be that naive to think that it's that easy. I mean, it's really, what do you know? Whatever you know is all you're going to look at. So it's people come in with multiple problems, and you have to be able to fix multiple issues and find out that, and normally it's multiple causes as opposed to one problem for one visit. That's not the way the body works. And you have to kind of unveil the underlying issues, whether the client knows it or not, and then all of a sudden the symptoms go away.
Interesting. In your experience, which we've highlighted, you've been doing this for over 25 years. What misconceptions do you think people have about osteopathy and physiotherapy in general?
I think a lot of it comes from, the medical profession itself. Like, you really do have to, not all physiotherapists or osteopaths are equal. They're not studying, it's not in the fabric of their nature to basically live and breathe their vocation. I do it because I love it. So, you can go to 10 different practitioners and get 10 different opinions and 10 different experiences. And I always say the proof is in the pudding. You got to compare apples and apples. So most of my clients have already seen 5 or 10 therapists, and they come to see me. And I always am like, I don't want to waste their time or their money. So the experience should be different.
Right.
I always use that classic Einstein quote: you can't expect a different outcome with the same mechanism. It has to be different. I have to be looking at you differently. So practitioners have to use their hands. I always say it's very organic. You got to use your brain. You got to use your hands. Exercise. I use a lot of acupuncture, and that's it. It's not. We're not using modalities like ice and heat. You could do that at home. I'll educate you on what to do, but don't waste your time with machinery. You got to basically really probe and sense through the body and find out and move the body and find out what the problems are.
Okay. So it makes sense to me. Have you, seen any unhealthy habits that people have from early on that's impacting their lives and contributing to, say, problems later on in their life as well as currently?
Well, yeah, well, not everybody's like you, Greg, who's a beast when it comes to exercise. Most people, you need to move your body. The body's designed to move.
Right.
And so in today's world of technology and computers and gaming and now virtual school, that's the biggest issue is you get into these habitual patterns day in and day out, month in and month out, year in, year out. And then you expect to be able to use your body to go running. Well, maybe when you're 15 or 20 that you can pull that off. But when you get into your 30s and 40s, it just doesn't work that way. You tend to get these patterns of strain and these holding patterns, and you need somebody to look at your body. And, the medical system is great, but they don't do a good physical anymore. So that's what we do. That's our little niche to complement the medical system.
Right.
To make sure this is how you're living in your body. These are the things you need to do. So I'm a big stretch guy. Okay. So trying to tell my clients that, listen, you have this pattern of strain, you have this holding pattern. This is how you overcome it on your own. It's not a drug. You can't just pop a pill. You need to be able to actively be involved. You have to understand what your problem is and know how to remedy it because you're your best therapist. So mobility and changing postures is key.
Right. So similar to, like, say, a aging car, you've got to do regular maintenance to keep it running properly. I recently read an article, a research article, where they said stretching could even help with blood pressure. Help,
yep,
I guess,
absolutely.
in a minor way or whatever. So it sounds like constant maintenance, especially as we age, because as you pointed out, when you're in your teens and early 20s, you can bounce back really quick. And, I've definitely experienced that as I've aged and kind of done sports. It's important to do all the things. And I say to the people I train with, if I would have, done these things, say, 30 years ago, I probably would have not ended up with the issues I ended up with and having to come and see you. So who knows, but it definitely would help by doing those things. So.
Right. I always say it's like the dentist. I mean, you go to the dentist 3-4 times a year. I go as often as I can to keep your chiclets clean, right? If you take care of your teeth, you floss every day, proper nutrition, hydration, the dentist doesn't have to do much. It's a really good maintenance program. I said, so if we take that enough, the rest of our body, the same thing. So you have to move, you have to stretch, you got to take care of yourself. You only have one body. So, yes, you can have replacement parts when you go see surgeons, but it's never the same.
Sure. And they always say that, right? Once you've done a surgery or whatever, the mobility, the natural mobility you would have had, it is decreased. A friend of mine who'd had a few spinal surgeries, talking about moving, the surgeon said to him, you're like a shark, you got to keep moving to live. So, to keep that, once you had the surgery, to keep, the spine, I guess, as flexible as possible, right? So
absolutely. And that article that you said, because I think we had discussed that about blood pressure, it makes complete sense if you understand anatomy. It's interesting because I just came off of a very cool embryology course from Europe, and it's how everything forms in your body, right? And they're like, people are like, well, but when you're an embryo, after fertilization, 8 weeks, yes, everything is formed, and then everything just grows from there. Right. So it's either formed correctly most of the time, and then sometimes it's formed incorrectly, and then you have problems. But the most interesting thing is blood vessels form before any organ, before your nervous system, before your brain. So the vascular system is there creating an environment for everything else to form and grow. So, and blood vessels are surrounded by connective tissue. So if you're in this retracted state of your body and you are stiff and your muscles and your connective tissue are shortened, your blood supply that's enveloped in that is going to be compromised.
Right.
So it completely makes sense in a science perspective, but we don't think about that in medicine. We just think, oh, you have a blood flow problem. Here's a pill.
Right.
Well, yeah, that's one intervention. But the other intervention is, well, why don't we maybe you're not living great in your body, and that's what's compromising vascular flow. So you got to look at it from different lenses.
Makes sense. Totally. So similar to my profession, right? There's not always one solution, and working with other professionals to get solutions, the right solution for the client is key. So I like that. What would you say to somebody, to our viewers, that say, look, I don't have any pain, I don't have any discomfort. What's the point of me going to see an osteopath or a physiotherapist like yourself? Like, what reason would they have to maybe consider doing that?
Getting some baseline information. I think it's always important to get some baseline information. at different parts of your life. I mean, I treat a lot of clients and they bring their kids in and they'll be like, okay, my son or daughter is 10 years old. They don't have any issues. Kevin, can you just check them out? And I'll go ahead, do a head to toe thorough physical assessment. And if they have no problems, I'll see you later. Let me check that body out again in 1 or 2 years as they grow, as they change with their environment, whether it's sport, whether it's whether it's because they're in school. It's just important to get some baseline information, because if you wait till later on in life, which I see a lot of people who've never seen a therapist before, and then you're like, now you're playing catch up because that pattern of strain is already ingrained in your body before your symptoms arise. Mm-hmm. So it's you go see your family physician, and that's really important. I'm amazed how many people don't even have a family physician. You need to go see your family physician, but we now need to work together to say, okay, family doctor doesn't have the time or necessarily the skill set to do a very comprehensive physical examination the way I might. So if we work together, they can say, go see Kevin, and he'll do a head to toe assessment on you and then determine if you need stretching, if you need any intervention moving forward. And then you have to be that honest, ethical, moral practitioner to be able to say to somebody, okay, everything is good. I don't need to see you, because ultimately I don't want to see patients. They should be able to be you need to educate, facilitate as a role as a therapist. I need to educate them on telling them what to do. It's their body. They're the best therapist. And that's the key. I don't need to have them keep coming back too regularly, because I think that's a problem in our profession. You get people coming back too much because it's a business. And you need to empower people to do things on their own. Well,
your comments remind me of when I first met you, and you said, I was pretty messed up at the time, as you remember, with my disc was the first injury, then my neck, then my leg. So, and you said, Greg, my goal is to get you healthy again and get you out there doing what you want. And then occasionally, if you have symptoms, come back and see me. And that's where we're at with me. And now, like, I'll just for our viewers say that I go see Kevin 1 week, and then 2 weeks later, I'm seeing a massage therapist. And then 2 weeks after that, I come back to Kevin. And for me, given my age and the amount of training I do, that's something that I do as a regular maintenance, because I don't want to be back where I was. And like you said, if you leave it years and years and years, then someone like yourself is spending, maybe months, years trying to unwind some bad things that kind of occurred that could have been prevented years earlier. So, so I like that.
And not everybody, Greg, who's in their 50s. I got 20-year-olds who can't do what you do.
Right.
And I treat a lot of high-level athletes, and they come in to see me, and their bodies haven't been looked at right. And so it's affecting their performance. And once they get a really good hands-on treatment, they're hooked, but they want to come in too much. And I'm like, no, you need to do this.
Right.
And you really have to drill into them that, listen, it has nothing to do with money. It has to do with you taking responsibility. And when they do, then it's like, okay, I'll see you once a month or once every 2 months, and just make sure, because they're just doing a lot more. They're demanding a lot more from their body than the average individual.
Right. Well, thanks for that shout out about my abilities. It's always good.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure.
And the last thing I'll comment on about you were saying how professionals should, have the focus to do the right thing, work together, realize that they may not always have all the answers, but someone else might be able to complement what they're already doing. It reminds me of when my neck issue, I went to see that neurosurgeon down in Hamilton, and he looked at the picture of the CAT scan, or the MRI, I should say, and he said that I was having issues on the left side of my body, and which has continued to be a trend with me. But he said, are you having any symptoms on the right side? And I said, no. He said, well, the picture looks just as bad on the right side of your body as it does on the left. And that's why I never operate based on a picture. He said I'd already discussed with him that I was seeing you and you were helping me. And he said, if your symptoms are improving, he says, you keep going to see that guy. And he said, when nothing else is working, that's when you want to come and see me. So you look at that and go, at least I did. And I said, wow, that's great advice from a professional, because he could have just easily said, okay, I'm going to operate. But he had my best interest at heart. Right. So.
Oh, that's so refreshing to hear that, because you don't hear that. I think
right.
I think one of the biggest issues is we don't communicate well. I think it's out there that, the medical community communicates and we're all working as a team. That's not the case, to be honest. 25 years of doing this, I work closely with the doctors and the specialists and write notes, but really there's a disconnect.
Right.
And to hear that, the next step I would love to see would be now myself and that surgeon communicating to say, well, what are you doing to get this better? Because we take a snapshot. That's all these MRIs and pictures and diagnostics are, is a snapshot of your body. Blood work, it's a snapshot. It gives you information, but it doesn't tell you the whole picture.
Right.
But there's a lot of people making their diagnosis on that. And I'm like, you have to take the picture, do a good examination, and do they correlate with one another? That's the biggest missing link.
Right.
Missing link. But the surgeon is not going to move you the way I'm going to move you, and I'm not going to operate on you. That's his job. Right. So if we collaborate more, you get the best kind of advice. And now the decision-making process on whether to go for surgery is I think, an easy decision or not to go. Right. So we need to do a better job.
So communication and collaboration.
Yeah,
probably, I mean, the two C's.
Yeah, the two C's.
Looking here, are there areas of medicine which you think professionals don't understand as well as they think they do? I think you've touched on that a little bit, but is there any specific areas that come to mind?
Anatomy, for sure. And anatomy encompasses all of medicine. If you look at old traditional, go back to some of the old universities. I have a great quote from, it's a University of Scotland, Edinburgh, I think. You walk into their medical facility and it talks all about the importance of anatomy, and it's from 1600s. So anatomy encompasses everything, all the ologies, physiology, pathology. You have to understand anatomy very well. And so dissection. So I spend a lot of time understanding the intricacies of an anatomy from a micro level to a macro level. So even studying embryology, that is anatomy, how anatomy forms. And it's for somebody like me who reads a lot of it, takes a lot of courses, dissects a lot. I'm amazed how much there is to know. And when I'm assessing people, especially medical professionals, I treat a lot of doctors and specialists, and everybody's in their kind of their blinders a little bit. And when they're like, well, why are you looking at my knee and I have a hip problem? They don't understand the anatomy links. Right. And you're like, well, okay, you have a symptom here, but you really have to understand fascia and muscles and bones and how it relates to each other and biomechanics. That's all anatomy. Right. So that is the biggest thing. Everybody needs to get back into the dissection lab and kind of, now that they're a practicing practitioner for 5, 10, 20 years, get back into the lab and you'll be amazed how little you know. Feel the textures of the body. Look at the orientation, because everybody's doing it on computers now. You need to do it on real, on people who've luckily have donated their body to science, because the only time you really have a chance to do that is when you're a student. Right. When you're a student, what do you know? You don't know much. You're just kind of, it's a funnel of information. You got to be able to go back, and it's called spiral learning. Go back and reintegrate the importance of anatomy, so that when somebody comes to see you, you have anatomy in your hands, and now you're just whipping through the body and you can just pinpoint the problems. And what seems easy to me is not easy to somebody else, but they're not investing their time in the study of anatomy.
Gotcha. That makes sense too, right? That you go out into the industry and you're practicing whatever your specialty is, and then you come back to the basics, and probably a lot of it makes a lot more sense at that point, because you have some tangible experiences to draw from.
Yeah, everybody always asks, they know that I study a lot. I'm on courses, and they're always like, oh, it must be nice to keep up with, all the new current stuff. I'm into the old stuff, the foundations, because I don't think the foundations are understood well. Like understanding cellular biology, understanding muscle physiology, understanding how the digestive system is related to how the body functions and works. And it's understanding really good fundamentals, because when you ask questions, and there's certain questions I ask when I train physios and doctors, they never get some of the fundamentals right. They don't have it at the tips of their fingers. Before you understand the more complex stuff, you have to really have a really good foundation. And I'm sure it's no different in your field too. Its fundamentals are really important. And I think that's being taught, but now it's like it's not at the tangible fingertips. So now you can integrate it immediately with your client.
Right. And if they were
So,
taught it, it's been many years ago. So going back and learning this, relearning, and like I said, and drawing on that experience again is probably very, very valuable, it sounds like. So
it's invaluable for sure.
um, if you were giving some advice to our viewers on lifestyle change, what would be one thing you'd recommend to them?
Lifestyle change. I would like to probably think the majority of the viewers would be having the careers or vocations where they're very sedentary. They're sitting in front of a computer or behind a desk for 40 hours, 50 hours a week. You need to invest into a standing desk. I wish I basically came up with that idea 15, 20 years ago.
You mentioned
Invest
that to me years ago, and that's what I'm doing this podcast from. I stand as much as I can, right? Because
and funny, I'm sitting and slouched, so that's hilarious.
Well, that's okay, because you stand all day when you're working. So
it's true. Is understand your postures you do all day and get into the regular habit of stretching. Okay. So and stretching isn't as fun as, like, I'm a very active person, so are you. I would rather lift weights. I'd rather go for a run. I'd rather play a sport, if you wanted my opinion. And stretching is a little bit more, obviously, slower paced, passive, but we tend to need that in our crazy busy lives. It's the passive, 20 minutes or half hour of stretching every day really kind of balances your nervous system out a little bit and helps to regain the elasticity of your body. That would be the biggest thing that people should be integrating into their life. I always say the people who go to yoga all the time, I don't have to see them as much. I treat a bunch of yoga instructors. They have the best moving bodies because they're investing in the constant movement and fluidity of their bodies. That's critical. So, but not everybody can invest 90 minutes or 2 hours. And not everybody's like you, right? So I always tell people 20 minutes. If you got in the regular habit of doing some stretching 20 minutes a day and being cognizant of your postures, standing, sitting, it goes a long way to the health of that body. Gotcha.
So standing, moving, stretching. I know you've told me, for our viewers who, I have discussions with people about, physical fitness and maybe not so much stretching and things like that, but people will say, I just don't have time. I've got a busy career. And by the time I get home or, working this and that, I will share what you told me. So it's not new. It wasn't my advice, but, even when you're at work, you can spend 10 minutes doing a stretch while you're on your computer, especially if you got a standing desk, or, at night when you're watching that program on Netflix or whatever, get on the ground for 10 minutes and do a few of the stretches that you should be doing. So you can still watch TV, you can still kind of work on your computer, and maybe if you're not doing that 20 to 30 minutes all at once, maybe you're breaking it up over the day. Sometimes I have to do that. I know what my stretches are, but I'll do, 10 minutes of it in the morning. By afternoon, I'm doing another 10 minutes. By late evening, I've done the other 10 minutes. Ideally, probably it's better to do it all at once, but at least I'm doing it, right? So.
Absolutely. I think my biggest struggle with clients is, clients like you are easy. That's typically the ones I want to see. The vast majority of my clients, they're not active. They're fairly sedentary through their life. Something happens in their 50s or 40s or 60s, whatever age range it is. And then you're right. You're having to change that pattern. And so it's up to them. So I have a lot of clients who are more than happy to pay me. And I'm like, it's not the point. The point is you need to now start to do these things to kind of change this pattern of your body. It's very difficult for them. Yeah. And some of them are now entering into the next stage of their life because, they've invested their money, they're retired, and they have zero quality of life. Right. And so now they're done their 30, 40 years of work, and now they're in chronic pain. So the advice to them would be, okay, so you can't take a pill for that. It's not going to work. So you have to start somewhere. But I always tell them, if I saw you 20, 30 years ago, you would never be in this position because I would educate you on telling you what you need to do to keep yourself functional and healthy. And I think that's what's missing in medicine a bit is preventative medicine. I think when you go see your physician, how important that is. They should be, if they're not doing a good physical assessment, they should be sending you to that really good physio or chiro or osteopath to make sure you're getting the advice to take care of yourself. Right. So in your 60s and 70s, you have longevity.
Yeah. And it is sad to think that, these people have worked so hard all their lives and now they're there at that point, like you said, where they're retired, but even going for a walk for half an hour may be difficult, or, getting on a bicycle and riding at a leisure pace on a bike path might be challenging. And, it's sad to think that. So, it's a good piece of information for those viewers who are not there yet to start doing the right things, right?
Yeah, it's that unreal expectation. It's probably very similar to you in money management in their portfolios. Everybody has this unreal expectation that the market's linear and all you do is make money, and there's no ebbs and flows. The body's ebbs and flows, and that it's that teeter-totter of balance. And they come to me with sometimes very unrealistic expectations, and they expect me to solve their problem. And I'm like, no, that's not how it works. You should have seen me 20 years ago, and now this is going to be a struggle. And yeah, a lot of times more often than not, they are moving in the right direction, but they should have done that earlier, right? Yeah. So
good analogy.
We have very similar parallels between our careers.
Yeah, good analogy. Putting the right, some of my other guests, we've talked about putting a plan in place, sticking to the plan, following the plan. And, I think goals are achieved sometimes through baby steps and not necessarily through giant steps. And, coming to me late in your career to say, can you make my retirement happen, is not ideal. And coming to you late in their life to say, can you fix all these problems, is not ideal either. So totally makes sense.
Yeah.
In conclusion, is there anything that you would like that we didn't touch on, that you would like to add or talk about?
One of the models I have in my life and in my practices is, we touched on the C's of communication. And I think it's the CAT principle. I think I should basically, I should get a patent on that. and it's the CAT: communication, accountability, transparency. So you have to be, and I think that follows in your personal life, in your all aspects of life. I think if you communicate, if you're accountable to people, and if you're transparent, you can't go wrong.
Right.
So you can't, and I'm trying to do that with my practice. I try to do that with my clients as best I can. They can see my passion. I'm very passionate about what I do. And they know they're going to basically get an honest evaluation of their health status. So I'd like to see that across my profession. And I welcome all other healthcare professionals to do the same thing. So you have to, for me, I envelop a lot of my time. Like, I'm up at the cottage, I'm off for a week. I'll probably spend 2 hours a day reading, studying, again, for myself, but also for my clients. Right. That's what I do. I quite thoroughly enjoy it. And then that goes into an easy CAT principle. So when people come and see me, I'm basically going to facilitate what they need to do. And it's not what everybody does. Sure. And I'd like to see our profession invest more in themselves. I know professionals who haven't taken a course in 15 years. You need to really be on top of your game in order to gain and garner the respect from the medical system. Yeah. Because as I said, there's a disconnect. We need to improve the communication with the doctors, so they can trust what you're doing. Right. Because they don't know what you're doing. They think we just do ice, heat, and modalities and ultrasound, and that's it. No, there's a hell of a lot more science that goes into that. So if you take that upon yourself, and it's not a job, it's a vocation. You don't have to be a complete workaholic like me, but I think when you are, my business doesn't suffer, because I get a lot of people coming and being referred to me to get a true, honest answer of what's going on in their body. Right. So,
and with, as you've talked about on this podcast, and then in our discussions that we've had, science is always evolving. There's always things to be learned. And so, if you're not continually learning, then maybe you're not delivering the best advice to the patient. So.
Right. And knowledge is always incomplete, especially in science. I'm the first person to tell you. And I think some of the smartest people always say that they don't know anything. Right. And I've been doing this for 25 years, and I'm amazed how little I know. Right. Because they're big rabbit holes, but maybe at the end of my career, I might know something. So but I think that's an honest truth for somebody who's a lifelong learner and tries to do the best for their clients. You're paying me for a service. I take that really seriously, and I need to know and communicate what I find with other healthcare professionals. And they need to be able to accept that information too,
Right.
that we have different opinions on what the problem is.
Right.
So I think that, again, comes back to communication with the client, with the doctor, and it should be how we provide the best healthcare to you.
Sounds like something we can all work on moving forward, and hopefully at some point in the future that will be the
I hope so.
the automatic process, I guess.
Yes, absolutely.
Not the suggested process, the automatic. So always a pleasure, Kevin. Always enjoy talking with you and getting your insights. You are a part owner in the sports clinic and the Carlisle Physio Rehabilitation Center. Is that correct? Or
that's correct.
Yeah. So once again, the sports clinic is in Oakville, Ontario. The Carlisle Physiotherapy and Rehabilitation Center obviously is in Carlisle. Kevin is a orthopedic manipulative physiotherapist and an osteopathic practitioner. And thanks again. I really appreciate your time. For our viewers, you can find the podcast on our YouTube channel or connect with me on LinkedIn, and you'll be able to see this podcast and future podcasts. So thanks for joining the Phillips Wealth Counsel podcast, and have a good day. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks for having me. Anytime.
All right. Take care.
Ciao.